if there was a national emergency, the president wasn't in the mental state to be able to potentially handle it, make tough decisions. If all of that is true, then who was making decisions for the country?
What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Welcome to another video. So we're going to continue our conversation surrounding this book that came out from Jake Tapper, exposing the Democrats covering up for Joe Biden. But in this segment here from CNN, the most important question was asked. Finally, this is the first time that I've heard anybody ask this question to Alex or Jake, which is who was running the country on behalf of Joe Biden. And Shermichael is going to ask this question. And the answer is a non-answer, in my opinion. But anyway, let's not waste any time getting into this video. Before we do, guys, hit the like button down below. It really helps the channel out. Let's get into it.
More damning revelations tonight about the Biden inner circle's efforts to hide his decline, including a scene in which the campaign staged a fake town hall. Why? Well, to quell concerns about his age and ability to interact with people. Joining us in our fifth seat at the table is the co-author of Original Sin, President Biden's Decline, Its Cover-Up, and His Disastrous Choice to Run Again. That is Alex Thompson. He's also a CNN political analyst and an Axios national political correspondent. And Alex, the fact of the fake town hall is not actually the worst part of the story that you report in the book.
Yes, other campaigns have used fake town halls. Now, I would say those town halls usually are in addition to real town halls. Joe Biden was doing neither. This fake town hall was in order to film it so they could make it into campaign commercials. They filmed it in Delaware with supporters. But Joe Biden, at this point, this is the spring of 2024, Joe Biden's town hall, which was closed to press, was so bad that campaign officials determined that it was not usable for a campaign commercial. So they took 90 minutes, 2 hours out of the president's day. They filmed an entire town hall, and they determined that it was not usable. Now, some people say this was because Joe Biden was incoherent. He could not really articulate his thoughts in a pithy or even semi-normal way. Some people just said, like, the lighting was bad. That was sort of the two points of view. But the point is, it shows how what the campaign status was in the spring of 2024 when they were trying to deal with a candidate that wasn't a decline.
Wait, someone told you the lighting was bad?
That's one of the excuses.
You're saying that they spent millions of dollars to stage a town hall? Well, we didn't get the lighting right.
That was one of the excuses.
I mean, and this comes back.
Yeah, I don't believe it. It had nothing to do with the lighting at all. He probably was incoherent, right? It was private. So he probably didn't have Jill Biden next to him, right, to help him answer questions and rescue Joe Biden when he's stumbling. So they probably just let him do his own thing, right, just to see how it would go. And let's just say, they rather blame it on the lighting. These people are crazy, yo.
Question of how many people were aware of things like that, but said nothing? And in fact, perhaps publicly said quite the opposite, that Joe Biden was fine, that everything was great. He was perfectly capable of doing this job for another 4 years. So
Absolutely. I was at the Justice Department at the time when we released her report, and he was the entire White House infrastructure at the time was calling the report gratuitous and said that Rob Hurst should have never called him a well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory. And every Democratic pundit, many reporters were out there saying that it was inappropriate for Rob Hurst to say that. And the reality is the whole reason why he put that in is because it was his whole reason not to prosecute. So it's really infuriating to hear this happening in the spring of 2024 around the time that the Hur report was released, and certain aspects in Alex and Jake's reporting really talk about the time frame being fall of 2023, whenever he did his interview with Rob Hur, as well as early 2024 when the release of the report. And so it's really frustrating, I think, as a Democratic Party, hearing now that they were lying to everybody. And not only were they lying to everybody, but they were bashing their own cabinet when it came to the Hur report.
One of the top Biden aides is Tom Donilon, and I'll play a little bit from Tom in a minute. Or I'm sorry, Mike Donilon. I'll play a little bit from Mike in a little bit, what he said after the election. But the nugget that came out about him was that he was paid $4 million to be a part of Biden's campaign from basically February to November. And Jen O'Malley Dillon was the next highest paid person at $300,000 plus a bonus. How does something like that happen? And when you told people that this is what you found out, what was the reaction in the Biden world?
It happened because Biden insisted it was going to happen. When Mike Donilon went to the campaign in early 2024, there were obvious objections among Biden's inner circle and on the campaign of paying Mike Donilon $4 million. But the president was insistent, pay Mike what he wants. You have to remember, Mike Donilon's been with Joe Biden since 1981. And he insisted, and that was the way it was. And you said from February to November, Mike Donilon went back to the White House after Joe Biden
didn't even get that far.
Yeah, was no longer the nominee. And there was a lot of internal anger and frustration, and there still is about this.
Charles.
Well, that's so many things. Number one is, I think a lot of us are kind of shocked and we're in the dark. I wrote a column about this is all kind of like made up, that they're trying to present him as a weaker candidate because of political reasons, and to find out later that that was not true, that I, as a journalist, was also part of that ecosystem of people questioning the motives, is really, really hard for a lot of people who did not, believe that Joe Biden's a good guy, but also just did not want this guy, right? That anything was better than Donald Trump, because even if Joe Biden is declining, he's not trying to destroy the country. Cannot say the same for the person who is now in the White House. And so that is, for a lot of us, I think, really hard pill to swallow. But I think you have to swallow. I think that is one of the things that I think separates people of honor, is that you can understand that new information and make a change. I think that is really important for a lot of Democrats to do, at the same time as saying, anything but this guy who's in the White House right now.
Let me play Mike Donilon.
That's what it was. Their Trump derangement got in the way of doing their jobs. All of these journalists who failed to report on this, because right after the Robert Ure report came out of saying that Joe Biden was too senile to stand trial, that's when all of these reporters should have literally flocked to Washington, D.C. to try to figure out what the hell is going on, right? But after that, they demonized Robert Ure and everybody else that tried to question Joe Biden's mental health, right? Because they knew if they were, in any way unbiased in covering the Democrats and Joe Biden, they would have helped Donald Trump. Imagine if the news was covering both of them fairly, right? Donald Trump won this last election in a landslide. Imagine if they covered Donald Trump fairly and the Democrats fairly. There would be no Democratic Party. There would be no Democratic Party. They're in the tank right now in the 27% approval rating. They would be in the single digits, probably 3%, if the media was fair. And they knew this. Their Trump derangement got in the way of reporting the truth. And all of these people are complicit, and it's hilarious how they're all sitting here and acting as if they didn't have anything to do with it. This is crazy.
He was asked at Harvard University about whether Joe Biden was cognitively impaired, and here was his response.
I watched him every day. There's this view out there, and you see it written as like it's fact. Oh, Biden was mentally impaired. I didn't see that. And I sat in a room with him for hours and hours. I don't know how much time any of those people spent with Biden. I know how much time I spent with him. I know what I saw.
Alex, is he just lying? Because you've detailed a lot of examples in this book where people around him saw him unable to carry out parts of the job in terms of understanding information, sitting in meetings, things like that. Is he just lying?
I don't know if he's lying to us people or if he's lying to himself. I think in some ways this is a very human story. We've all had aging people, and people react to aging people they love in very different ways. Sometimes they realize, man, this person needs help, and sometimes they're a little bit in denial about it. And I think it's possible that this could be the case.
Is there a difference there, though? He specifically says the words mentally impaired. Is there a difference in your reporting between decline and elderly decline and a mental impairment. I think that is there a difference there? And if there is, I think it's significant to say that.
It could. It sort of depends what he says. I mean, there were moments when there were members of his own cabinet that would have been concerned if a crisis had happened at that moment.
Right.
You know, is that impaired or is that just him being a little out of it?
Yes,
I don't know.
Yes.
Sure, Michael.
Alex, let me ask you this question. I haven't read the book, but I've seen the reporting. You guys talked to 200 plus people on the record. They were saying some staff members didn't have access to the president. Cabinet members for months didn't have access to the president. There was concern. You just stated if there was a national emergency, the president wasn't in the mental state to be able to potentially handle it, make tough decisions. If all of that is true, then who was making decisions for the country?
Well, I'd say, you know, the president, there's also the president and there's the presidency, right? And there is an infrastructure around the president that is making decisions at all times.
Oh,
now,
I'm
there
aware of that.
are some decisions that always have to go up to the president. But I'm saying that in the immediate circle around that, on the national security side, you're talking Jake Sullivan, Anthony Blinken. On the political side, Mike Donilon, Steve Ricchetti. On the policy side, Bruce Reed. And then also just sort of on the schedule, like personnel side.
Here's the conundrum for Democrats here. I get everything you're saying, Alex. I'm aware of that. When people vote for a president, yeah, they get their staffers, advisors are going to help do the job. They get that. But they also want to fundamentally know that the person that they voted for, no matter what happens at 2 a.m. call we always used to hear about, that this guy can take the call. And it's very clear from this book that Joe Biden couldn't take the call for an additional 4 years, and he probably should not have continued the remainder of his presidency.
Yep, we're going to stop it right there. That's the end of the clip from this segment right here. And he's absolutely right. Who took that call for Joe Biden, right? Who was the one that was going to press that button if it needed to be pressed? Because I know it wasn't Joe Biden. Everybody knows it wasn't Joe Biden. And that's the most important question, right? And that's the question that I want to know if there's an answer to in this book, right? Because if they were actually doing real journalism, they would not stop right there. They would not stop at finding out, oh, the Democrats were covering up. No, we know they were covering up. Now we need to find out who was running the country for Joe Biden, right? And that's why I say these guys like Jake Tapper and Alex are grifting, because if they were actually doing real journalism, they would have went all the way as far as they can go in this rabbit hole, which is, hey, who was running the country? And that would have been part of the book. They would have asked and interviewed people and say, hey, who was making the final decision for Joe Biden? And that should have been the conclusion of that book. Hey, Joe Biden was getting old. He's losing his mental capacity. He possibly has cancer as well. That should have been in the book. And everybody knows that he wasn't diagnosed in the last 100 days, right? They didn't find none of this out. Was this in the book? I need to read this whole book by my damn self, because I don't think that was part of the book, because nobody has been talking about it. And I don't want to buy the book because I'm not trying to give these people any money. They don't deserve my money. But yeah, that's what I want to know. That's the biggest question here, is who was running the country on behalf of Joe Biden. And boy, oh boy, I want to find out. That's going to be one hell of an answer. That's going to be one hell of an answer. Man, I can't wait. But anyway, let me know what you guys think. Let's talk about this video in the comment section. Hope you enjoy the content. Hit the like button down below. Of course, leave your opinions in the comments as well. Really, really enjoy reading them. And of course, if you're brand new, consider hitting subscribe. I'll see you on the next one. Peace.